Okay, so we have our pattern. I laid that out on my wood, and I went to the scroll saw. I cut out the outside, obviously, and then I cut out all these intersections. So that makes it a lot easier to get started on this. Then I wanted to decide. The next thing I did was I made these marks, the over and under lapping. So it's like a weaving, and it's easy to remember. You just, each of these 3 half circles here, each one it goes under, and then the next time it goes over, next time it goes under, and it just keeps repeating that. So make sure you lay that out with a pencil so you don't confuse yourself. And I did it on both sides. And once I did this side, I made sure this one was over. So then I flipped it over and made sure that was going under, and I did that. So then I make sure that I don't have any, I don't want it to go over on this side and over on this side. It can't possibly do that. So then I want to indicate, with my little drawing here, I did it with some shading. I showed which one went under. So what I did to just establish that in my carving was I just took a little V tool, and I just went along my line on each side, paying attention to the grain, and not taking off any more of this than the line. There is a little bit of the line showing, so make sure that I don't carve too far in it. So the first thing I do is I mark all the highest spots on here, which is going to be at the intersection on either side. So these are going to be fairly untouched. Okay, I'm not going to start carving those. Eventually I will round this off and take off just the very top part of the surface, but this is really going to be the highest part of the carving. Okay, and so here it's at its high point, it comes to here, and then it goes down to the lowest point. So we know here it's going to be the bottom half is going to stay in. Okay, you're going to do about a halfway point here, about a quarter in, and a quarter down here. Okay, so it goes from the high point to a midpoint here. Okay, so each of these, and then from here it heads down. It heads up to the highest point, like that. Okay, and then here it begins to go down to this low point. And then same thing here, highest point here, lowest point here. And this one, here's the thread here, it has to be up here. Okay, and then it goes down to this, from there. Okay, so that's the idea. So we're going to take our bench knife here and begin to define this a little bit more where it crosses over. It's probably a good idea to have my thumb guard on too. So okay, so I'm going to come down to this halfway point. I hope you can see what I'm doing here, and you really have to take your time because this is just, the grain is just going every which way, and each of these points, it's going to be going a different way. So on this point, the grain is going this way across here, so you're cutting across the grain, so that's going to be real tricky. This one, it's kind of half and half. The grain is going this way, and this way it's going here. Okay, so at each of these points of the form, you're going in a different direction regarding the grain. Okay, so what you really have to do is establish these low points. As I said, this is a low one, it crosses under, so here it's a halfway. Okay, so at the center you're doing the halfway, you're gonna establish this, but only at the corner. I'm sorry, only at the intersection of this. Okay, I'm switching knives because this one's just not sharp enough right now. So I got this guy. Now what I'm trying to do here, as I said, is I'm trying to get this down to halfway right here, And I'm preserving this. I'm trying not to touch this. And then over here, I'm getting it down to this corner, taking this corner off. This is where it's good to have the thumb protector, because you really want to be able to change your carving direction with your knife. Not necessarily, I mean, it's easy enough to rotate this around, but sometimes it's just easier to flip the knife. This is coming out here. Okay, so all I'm trying to do right now is establish my final high and low points at the intersections where it crosses over, and then also at the ends. From my lowest point here up to this middle section, I'll begin to take this out and transition from here to here. Start taking this out. Okay, I'm being very careful not to lop off something that I wish I didn't lop off. Okay, so now you can see already that if I wanted to make this in the style of a flat plane crossing over here, it would be a little more challenging. And that's a fun project to do also. Now once we've established kind of the low point on these outer intersections, then we want to look to the inside and even that down. So we want to make sure that we get this whole thread going underneath, this one going underneath this one. Okay, so just keep looking at it and making sure that all of these 3 points are looking the same. Okay, now if you notice, it's thinner across here than it is across here. So, we'll fix that later. What we'll do is we'll look at this curve, and I can see if I follow this curve along here, it's a little thick in here. So what I have to do is trying to position my hand so you can see it, and it's not always the best carving position. So I will be taking this okay, and I can also take some off the outside of it over here to even it until I get this even. So this is the thinnest, so obviously the whole thing is going to have to be that thin. So when I get to rounding these over, I'll be able to see, I went the wrong way there. Once I start rounding these over, then that's when I'll be able to adjust the thickness. I keep looking at it and making sure that I'm going even, and then I flip over the other side and do the same thing. Okay, so and I find it easier to not complete any one of these intersections or the thickness of any of these, and just kind of keep turning it and going around, so that whatever I'm doing, I'm doing. Now this one, the grain's going this way, so it's a little tricky. I'm going to actually push my knife this way, sliding it. So I'm actually cutting this way, but even though it looks like stuff really sticks to the plate. I'm going cross grain here, that's tricky. And then the other thing is, I want to keep in mind that I always want to, this is constantly transitioning. Okay, it's constantly either going over or under something. You're not going to stay at any one point. So you see here, it has to go from here around here smoothly. So and I'm not doing anything too aggressively, because it's easy to snap a piece of this stuff off. This is not as forgiving. It's as soft as basswood, but it's not as forgiving. The grain. The grain is straighter or just, I don't know, it tends to split. Let's put it that way. And then the other thing is, like I said, it's constantly transitioning. So from here, I don't want to go up and down and up and down. I want to go gradually from a high point to a low point. So from here to here, it shouldn't be higher in the middle. This should be higher than this, and this should be higher than this. So it works its way down. Before I do any kind of cut, I make sure I'm going the right way, because this is just constantly changing. Now the next thing I want to do is I want to have look at each of my strands. That's the word I looked for before, and make sure that on this side and on this side I'm even, because the highest point is going to be in the middle, because it's a round. And then little by little I'm starting to kind of, as I transition, I'm rounding it. Okay, and eventually the whole thing will be rounded. So again, constantly changing my directions here. Okay, so we just keep doing this. We just keep. Right now I'm starting to take off these edges. Okay, I'm chamfering around it now, which is the beginning of my rounding. So all I'm trying to do is get it so everything has just a little bit off of it. I'm not leaving anything with its original edge on it. And then eventually I want all this sawn part, rough part, to go away. That was actually sanded. Okay, so it's all going to be just knife cuts. And with a sharp knife, this wood leaves a very nice little finish on it. Kind of has a mahogany look to it. And this is a great piece you can just sort of have in your bag and take with you wherever you go, because it's small. I would have, 3 or 4 of these, maybe different woods, roughed out in my bag, so that whenever I want to just carve a little bit, I can pull one of these out. It's a really good practice piece. It's a good piece to keep your knife skills honed. No pun intended there. But you want your knife honed, and you also want your skills honed. So this is a good one to do it. So I'm going to continue on with that, and once I get this all down to the size and shape that I want it, then we'll talk about what we're going to do to finish it. Am I going to just leave knife marks in it, or am I going to round it? Okay, so nice little project. See you later.